Alright guys, and welcome to the first video on my new channel. Today I'm going to be telling you what is the best weapon for leveling in New World. So what do we want in a weapon when it comes to fast leveling? First of all, we want a weapon that does big damage to obviously kill the mobs very fast to save time. Ideally we want the weapon to do cleave damage so you can kill multiple enemies at once to save even more time. And then you also want a weapon that kind of has great sustainability. And what I mean by that is you want a weapon that reduces the amount of time you have to wait around for your health and mana to regenerate. I think the two best candidates are the Ice Gauntlet and the Hammer, but I prefer the Hammer because it doesn't require any mana, plus it heals you for all the damage you deal, so you basically don't have to stop at all to heal yourself. And obviously it doesn't cost any mana. So there's three things that I want to cover in this video. First of all, how to take full advantage of the Hammer, how to execute really big AoE pulls and, complete one quest in one pull, or one quest in the space of about 20 seconds. Then I want to talk about what other weapons synergize very well that you can combine with the Hammer. And then thirdly, I want to talk about how I set up my character, what equip load I'm using, what stats I go for, and everything like that. Now the first thing we need to talk about is this talent here, Prevailing Spirit. You can get this very early on at level 4. What it does is you regain 30% of all the damage you deal as health when using a Crowd Crusher ability. So every time you use an ability, you are going to heal yourself. And this isn't just based on single target damage, this is based on AoE damage. So the more enemies that you hit, the more damage you deal, and therefore the more you heal. Pretty much when you're doing these AoE pulls, one ability will get you straight back to full HP. So the first ability we have is Shockwave. What you do is you jump into the air and you do a big AoE stun. This is the first ability you're going to use when you clump up enemies together because it stuns them, and then you can line up your next abilities after that. Then we have Path of Destiny, which basically does really big AoE damage in front of you in a line, as I'll show you right here, and it's quite a distance. Plus, it actually will stagger enemies when you have it talented as well. Next we have Clear Out, so this is probably the least AoE of them all. Unless the enemies are really close to you, it will do ridiculously good AoE damage, so I'll show you that as well. So as you can see, you have to wait for the enemies to be quite close to you. It will also push enemies back. Now I want to show you basically the weapon in action. As you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get extra mobs in my pull with a ranged weapon like the Life Staff. The Fire Staff or the Ice Gauntlet works too. And this is actually kind of a bad pull because I mess up my keybind when I'm trying to switch weapons, so I actually take a lot of damage. But the reason why I want to show you that is despite the fact my health goes so far down, you'll see how much it goes back up with just one ability. So as you can see, all the enemies are clumping up together. Sometimes you have to kind of wait a little bit for the enemies to clump just by doing a little bit of rolling. So as you can see here, my health goes down a lot because I don't switch weapon fast enough. But one shockwave, my health has drastically been increased by that. When I do Path of Destiny, my health is already back up to full. And where you can also see what I'm doing here is I'm doing heavy attacks. Now heavy attacks also do AoE damage. As you can see, I've finished off 2 enemies with one heavy attack right there. So basically, just to recap that, you're trying to pull as many enemies as you can for a particular quest. Then you're going to wait a little bit for them to clump together. You can do this by just running around or dodging kind of left to right, kind of like how a Frost Mage does it in World of Warcraft. Then you just start, spamming your AoE damage abilities. If you don't finish the enemies off with your AoE abilities, then it is best to just kind of keep kiting until your abilities come back on cooldown. But when you have enough strength and you're light equipped, to talk more about this later, you should be able to finish off all of the enemies that you pull within a couple of abilities. If you're taking on enemies round about the same level, if you're taking on enemies that are slightly higher level, then you may not be able to finish your enemies off with your abilities, and therefore you have to wait for your cooldowns to refresh and then use your abilities again. Now I want to talk about what weapons go well with the Hammer. At the moment I'm using the Life Staff. I think the Life Staff is the safest option because you can basically pop down Sacred Ground and Beacon before you switch to your Great Hammer, which provides great AoE healing, and it just kind of just makes it a little bit easier, helps you stay alive a little bit better. Because when you run out of your abilities, you're going to start using heavy attacks, but obviously you're going to stop healing yourself with the Great Hammer, so it just makes the phase where you're switching to your heavy attacks to finish off the enemies, a little bit easier, a little less risky, because you're still going to be getting healing. But leveling up, I've tried, numerous different weapons as my second weapon. For a while I used Ice Gauntlet. That is great again for, ping pong pulling more mobs to you, and then you can apply a little bit of extra AoE. You can also use the Entombed ability. That is really good because basically you pop Entombed, and then you can wait for all of the enemies to clump up around you, quickly roll out, and then go into a shockwave. It is a little bit easier to get those enemies clumped up, which can be nice. Plus, when you pop out of Entombed, you gain 25 defense for 3 seconds, and that's also very nice. You're never going to do a lot of damage with, the Ice Gauntlet or the Fire Staff if you want to use a Fire Staff as well, because that is very good. Mainly because obviously you're not stacking intelligence of this build, so that's why I only really use the second weapon for the utility to aid the Great Hammer's, setup. I've also used the Great Axe as my second weapon. The Gravity Well is very nice because it can help finish mobs off, but normally, when you try and use the other abilities, because they don't heal you, it can be very, very risky. I'm not going to lie, a little bit of poo comes out every time I switch to the Great Axe and try to AoE the mobs down, because, I'm going into melee range with all these mobs and I have no way of healing myself, so normally I just end up being very close to death, and I end the fight on very low health, which means I have to, eat food or something like that to get my health back up, whereas, if I use other weapons, I end the fight on max health. And obviously when we use the Life Staff, even if you end the fight on low health, you can switch the Life Staff to just heal yourself back up and then carry on pumping. So let me show you how I've set up my character. When it comes to talents, you can really go with what you want. I'll just talk about some of the key talents. Obviously, you want the first 3 abilities to really pull this off. And obviously, you want Prevailing Spirit, like I mentioned before. And then you can go for whatever you want from there. Although what I really do like is Meteoric Crater. That increases the radius of Shockwave, because obviously it increases the damage and the radius of the stun. And then I also like Concussive Impact, because that's going to increase my damage by 15%. After I've used Shockwave, because obviously Shockwave applies the debuff, and then whether I'm using Clear Out or Path of Destiny straight after that, the damage of that ability is going to be increased by 15%. It's also very good to get Hammer Time, because what you can do is you can fit in a quick heavy attack and then start using abilities for an extra 20% increased damage on your abilities for 4 seconds after you've used a heavy attack, so that can also go very well. So when it comes to setting up your character, in my opinion, I would go full Glass Cannon, right? Because what you're trying to do is you pull all the enemies and you just kill them before they can really do any damage to you, before they're ever really a threat. So what I'd always recommend is going light armor load, because obviously you get that 20% extra damage, and then just getting full strength gear. You can normally find extremely cheap full strength gear pieces on the trading post, and that's what I've been doing. Because obviously the faction gear also has constitution on it, and I don't really like that too much. I have tried going for a strength and constitution build, and then I just did too little damage, and it meant I had to wait for my abilities to come off cooldown again. It just didn't really work. You really just want full on strength, so you can just kill the enemies with one cycle of your abilities and then a few heavy attacks to finish them off. So yeah, as you can see, all my gear has full strength on it. Just a quick tip, guys. Your secondary weapon, even though you may not be using it, the stat on it will actually, be added to your character. So you want like a Life Staff or Ice Gauntlet, whatever secondary weapon you're using, with full strength as well. And then ideally you want a ring and necklace with full strength as well. I do have one with constitution on there just because that's, what I was given when I made it. So I would recommend getting the dual crafting skill leveled up so you can make these pieces, although I have noticed that they're ridiculously cheap on the trading post as well. You just have to find the one, with the correct stats. Although if you do feel like you're dying too much because you're a little bit too squishy, you can go for full heavy armor with full strength on it, and maybe some constitution pieces if you also want them, because it does take a little bit of practice to pull off the method that I'm really using. So until you get more confident, you may want to go for heavier gear and more constitution gear. But the downside to that is you may not be able to kill all the enemies fast enough before your abilities are, totally used. So just be mindful of that. And when it comes to attributes, I have just put all of my points into strength, mainly because I just want to deal as much damage as humanly possible, but also because I want these extra perks. So particularly if this is level 4 perk right here, I do 10% increased damage on stunned, slowed or rooted enemies. Once you get this, this is when the build becomes just so ridiculously like brain dead. It's that easy, because your enemies, because you're always using an ability that's either going to slow them or stun them with, because if you look here at the the hammer, right, first of all you've got shockwave, which is stunning them, and then you've also got aftershock, which means they're slowed for 4 seconds after you use any ability. So basically you have a permanent 10% damage increase, and this stacks with concussive impact, that's 15%, so you've already got 25% extra damage, and then you can boost that to 45% with hammer time, and then an extra 20% for 65% extra damage when you have light equip load. And this will also stack with my gem. I've got a Gambit gem, which increases your damage by an extra 9% where your stamina is not full, and your stamina is basically never full with this build because you're always rolling around. So yeah, overall that is an extra 72% extra damage pretty much constantly. And another good gem to use is the gem that increases your damage when enemies are stunned and slowed. Basically a replica of this perk here. Increased damage on stunned, slowed or rooted enemies, because that's also great because again your enemies are going to be constantly slowed with that last talent in Crowd Crusher. But anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. My name is Borrowbeer. Ciao.